welcome.
Hello there.
Hello. I'm just, Raphael, I'm just trying Laura again. See how that works. Okay.
Okay, I can hear you now.
All right.
Hi, Adam.
Hey, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Boom, boom, boom. Sorry, guys, I just have to press another button. But that was quite a good Friday on Friday.
It was. I was surprised Vint managed to stay an extra 30 minutes. His schedule is so insane.
He stayed another hour. We were there for 2 hours.
Oh yeah, that's true. That was surprising.
So, Adam, how are you?
Colds. We have had heavy colds in the family here, so for a week now. So it's a really heavy cold. So I'm a bit under the surface right now.
Frode, you make fun of the cold here in Brazil when it's not really cold, but you forget the fact that our infrastructure has zero preparations for even a little bit of cold. So whatever breeze comes in, it comes in and it makes its presence felt.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of California. So yeah, cold can get cold quickly.
Yeah.
I managed to send to Laura, so I've forwarded, and Emily's taking care of the other stuff, so that's good.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I had a chat with Mark Anderson right before this, and he had an interesting issue. When you are writing an author and you made something italic, how do you then stop it being italic? In some software, you can do Command-I with no text selected, and the text following will be toggled italic or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we don't have, but we do need to implement it. But it's interesting how many kind of invisible things there are depending on what's chosen. So yeah.
Yeah, and that list, as time goes, I'm sure that list will keep growing of a bunch of minor things that change from either specification to specification, from language to language, from use case to use case.
But in the cases of you guys, when you've written something and you have no selected text, Command-B or Command-I, will it toggle the mode you're in? And generally how you use it?
We're using Markdown and we haven't implemented a little toolbar yet to change it. So you have to actually either import it or write out. We have a little guide on the side that shows how to bold and italic using Markdown, but we don't have a little toolbar yet for it.
Interesting. I guess we'll have to put it higher up on the to-do list.
But it's one of the things, I remember when I started using the IA writer, that it didn't have anything. Like you couldn't change the font, you couldn't change absolutely anything. You just focused on the content and the structure. And I always think, like, what's the minimum you need to have enough customization and enough visual architecture for the document, but not so much that it's overwhelming for people to just keep trying to find the best font or the best size or the best color or whatever. I think those just end up derailing from the original activity. Headphones. they are.
So Adam, how are you doing with your system now that you got a cold? Have you been able to work on it?
Almost not at all, because I really have a cold when I don't like screens anymore. Then I have a really tough cold. So with the light cold, I just want to be in the bed with the screen, but with the tougher cold, I don't want to see the screen even. So that's usually how we decide it in the household. If it's just a man cold minus or a man cold plus.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But can you share screen anyway? Now that there's so few of us, it would be really fun to talk through a few things.
Which one do you?
Too many devices. I'm thinking about the one with the little boxes on the left.
Is there at 4 different devices here?
The infinite.
The one with the box on the. Let's see if that's running. It's not. So where is that? You mean this one?
Yeah. So I think it's worthwhile discussing a little bit what the point of this thing is supposed to be. Step a little back, like we tried to do a few times. And, if this is your own documents, which it isn't, or a library, which it is, a specific section of a library, I guess it serves very different needs for the user. You are more interested in a general library, aren't you, Adam?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, yes, I am, because at least your personal library is of course selected by you in some sense. You may not like every. Yeah, you may not like everything, and you may not have read even most things, but you have selected them in some way.
Because one of the things that's stressing me about visual meta, and that's not what we're talking about here, but it has an effect, and that is, if we just do more ACM stuff, chances are the self-citation will be there, but the internal stuff, the headings and the glossary, that will not be there. I'm scared that will not be implemented, right? So one of the things we had, hi Mark, it's been seconds. So one of the things we discussed is, with a system like this, when you zoom in and you have just a couple of documents or one document, you still want to be able to have an augmented reading experience, right? So I'm wondering if this system were to accept full visual meta documents, and it was integrated into authoring software, including, of course, Author, then one of the things I would like to build, if you have an online thing for this, is maybe even a button when I export my final document or something I'm a bit happy with, that it also goes online and goes in here. That might be useful, right? So when you're going through this, you may toggle into a mode where you are just looking at your old documents, or you may want to find out who has cited your document, not so often, but more likely, I'm going to write a new paper now, and I'm interested, it's going to be in the same thing, it's my field. So why don't you just show me first everybody whom I have cited? That kind of stuff. So that's why I'm thinking the ability to import easily. I'm not saying you technically have to build it, but I'm wondering, it seemed to me that you didn't want to have a pristine hypertext 21 conference only thing. You want to build something that allows you as a user to add to it, right?
Yes, it depends on what we're doing. I'm fine with doing something more limited as well. Just doing ACM hypertext as a visionary thing, so other people can see the see the light, as Mark often says, that they have to really see what you can do. So that's one thing. But personally, for myself, I want to see a library and the full library and more things and dynamic things as well. So not just something you download once a year after a new year has been released, but something
so
that really takes.
Here's a completely different challenge, Adam. Sorry. I was just excited. Please keep talking. I interrupted you.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. How about we, at least for the next few minutes, think of designing a system for a class of university students and their one teacher. So let's imagine that they have a writing assignment, which will include citations and stuff. The teacher has them all put it in a central space, whatever that might be, and this system can read that. So now the job of the system is to help the teacher grade this with as little effort as possible, because grading is very, very boring. So the first thing it can do is the teacher has set a library of big important sources for that field. So maybe one of the things instantly we could see in a view like this is, these are the documents that cited most of them. This one cited hardly any. But in both cases, you can instantly go in and see, okay, it cited everything. Does that mean to just copy the reference section? Or can I quickly look at the bits in the document where the citations appear to spot check whether it makes sense?
Yeah, and that ability, of course, translates to regular documents and regular use cases as well. When you're reading for your own pleasure or work, you really want to see the references, the reference list, and the citation, the place of citation or place of reference, side by side. Or
I think that's a really good observation, Adam, because it's just part of this generalizing. Because to a certain extent, we need to find something small enough that whether we build it in full or even in a mock-up, that we can even get that far. But then generalize, because it would be lovely if we could have all the world's books online by November and do something funky.
No, but we do. We do have all the books in the world online.
Well, yeah, but not necessarily abstracted in the form that we want it and available.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I mean is, a generalizing point is saying that you know that at least hopefully most of the people in the audience, or certainly those with a degree of technical familiarity, can see that it is actually potentially possible that you can take this small idea and lay it onto a much bigger corpus, or indeed just a very different corpus. So it's getting, because a lot of people do tend to follow it's a bit like the sort of laser pointer. It's not Kitty running around behind the laser pointer. People will hang on the last thing you said, and despite your best intent, will never quite lift their eyes to the bigger picture. So that's one of the things we will have to do.
But so, Adam, you don't plan to be teaching the kind of stuff where you would need something like this, right? Like a helping to mark thing. You're doing the magical mute. And yeah, there we are.
The keyboard shortcuts only work half of the time for me. I don't know why. No, my theater students, they are very averse to reading.
I am actually supposed to work with some specific part of that, but if it happens, I'll tell you guys, we'll do it. But Adam, I think because you're actually doing the heavy work, and we're grateful for whatever you do, I think it may be very useful if we really drill down on what you want to have, and then we can, quote unquote, help you by giving you lots of ideas, and some of them you may actually want to implement. So you're a knowledge worker in the truest sense. You do it for the pleasure of it, right?
Yep, you could say that.
So that means you need to find stuff to read and find stuff to ignore. Ignoring is probably as important. You see something that's shit, mark it as such, and you never ever want to see it again unless you do a special kind of toggle, right? That's a really huge, important, like the triage thing. And then there's also how you deal with your own notes, right? So let's just wait for Peter to connect.
Yeah, so one way, let's imagine that these documents are 1,000 PDF documents that you have collected yourself. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good, and they concern a few different fields, maybe. So they're not relevant they are not relevant for the same thing at the same time. So so there is some sort of. So how do we subdivide these 1,000 documents? Some of which contains a few annotations in them, and some of them which you also have the physical book, which I find very important because I often.
Peter,
yeah.
No, I just wanted to tell Peter. Hi, Peter. What we're doing is going through this particular system where the hypothetical user is someone who just wants to learn stuff, and that hypothetical system is very real in Adam. So he's going to be doing the work. So we're trying to find out more about what he wants the system to do, hence the current dialogue.
Ah, very good.
The thing, listening to Fred and Adam just now, it occurs to me is with this sort of left pane of this thing, one of the things that that sort of cries out is because, as Adam just said, you might have stuff from several different genres. Well, they could be colored up, or it might be that indeed the categories, rather than date, you might, assuming that they are, discrete sets and not just tag buckets, that it might be that you want to. So one of the things, without committing to sort of doing everything, one of the useful things perhaps to have in this putative left side as it exists now, regardless of what it looks like later in the process, is to do several different display forms within there. So I notice you're already doing a thing like you're offering a sort of you put the yellow in there, which I'm whether that was just literally hardwired or whether you were using, for instance, the spatial hypertext papers or something, which is a guess, but I don't know. But there are several ways you might want to do this. You might want to be laying something effectively like a subject layer, a mapping, like what are all the spatial hypertext papers in this? Or you might want to say, look, I like to see this whole corpus, but I'd like to see it reamed apart into, assuming we had the metadata, into discrete groups. So because that, if nothing else, gives you an immediate sense that, oh, this subject only has 10 papers, and half the papers are in this other bucket, which actually tells you two things as well. It may, for instance, it may just tell you that your classification system, my classification system, whatever, is rubbish and needs improvement. But these are really valuable things, and sometimes the visualization of that alone is incredibly useful. So a thought there, and I just throw that out because I don't know how complex those are to sort of entertain within that view.
It shouldn't be too complex, I think. So we really, this view desperately needs some sort of filter system. So so we could, if I want to, this view, if we want to remove all social media papers, for example, to just look at hypertext, I really want to have a kind of the rough divide here. And sometimes it's not possible to get everything right, but at least right enough or good enough for.
Yeah, and I'm just conscious that as long as there are dates down one side, a lot of people, because that's the way they think, will assume that all this does is create a timeline, which isn't, it's doing far more than that. But again, if you're not used to looking at things, you're not used to abstraction, it won't strike you that way.
No, this is extremely minimal right now, and even more minimal than the other prototypes. So we have to fill in the blanks here.
Yeah, but I like that it's minimal. It's just this thing that, so if we think of in a sense, a number of very small transforms to the side, almost anything else but a time list. Just a way to shake people out of their sort of complacency. Say, oh, right, it isn't a timeline. It's other things as well, because I think this is what we're edging towards. We're getting this in multiple views, and we can then follow it out in all these other ways as well. But just getting people to understand that part of the richness here, the point of having the metadata, or the appropriate amount of data, is the ability to do this very thing. which otherwise you have to do yourself a lot of sort of, paper and pencil rubbing out and getting very angry.
Adam, can you open like a trail of a bunch of those if you keep clicking on little squares? Do they just keep opening to the sides?
Clicking here replaces the current selection. So, but if I click in that document,
then it opens a new one.
Then it's open a new one. That reference opens here. So it's nested in that way.
Yeah. So it's like the example that you sent from that blog.
Exactly.
Yeah, I really like this way.
But was it on Friday someone mentioned, well, could we have it 2 layers? I can see the problem comes out from that is the moment you do that, someone said, right, I started, 99 threads running off the left-hand thing, and it's all getting a bit big. So there's a challenge in, how you reuse the available space. So if one's going to take multiple trails off, but I do think it's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
One thing
that also you might end up needing to stack them once you have like a big trail. If you're deep into like 6 different links and you want to see an overview, having them stacked, kind of like a little bit to the side would be interesting to get a quick overview.
It feels quite easy to just go back and forth and to look at it, pan it around. That feels very natural. To me, so that is not so much of a problem, but maybe having a small, having the titles in kind of a breadcrumb trail somewhere.
Yes.
Or some alternative way of showing everything. A minimap is quite hard to implement in a good way, but it could be a way of doing it.
Just really quickly, sorry, Peter, I saw your hand after that. It would be fun, I'm not sure how useful, maybe useful. So if you go all the way to the left, please. So the one you clicked on, make that obviously some kind of selected color there. But then when you go to the next one on the screen like this, then on the screen on the left, you actually do draw a line between them.
Yep. That's kind of on my to-do list, but it's nice to have and not need to have, so I haven't done that. But it makes sense to really draw the lines. In this case, it makes, as it's a single line and a large corpus, it really makes sense to highlight it, draw.
Because that way we can choose to have, so obviously in the green box, it goes chronological, but from left to right could then be coded with different things, like most cited or whatever criteria you want. But anyway, yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest a little affordance here. Since there's a possibility that we're expanding from notes anywhere in that horizontal flow, how about if when we do that, we put a top border of, say, just like 2 or 3 pixels, blue line running from the note that the note is being open from over the note that's being opened from that note. So let's say we start off with, we have one trail with note A pointing to note B pointing to note C. That would be represented by a blue bar across all 3. Now, if we go back to note A and we open note G from it, we could then get a second vertical bar just between note A and note G that would appear underneath the 3-note wide vertical bar connecting the initial notes that were visible. Then you'd basically be able to see the secondary trails just with that top vertical indicator there. So you'd know when you look at one note, whether it was open from the note immediately to its left or whether it was part of the existing flow.
I think I need a napkin sketch of this description, Peter.
Yeah, I'll try to
go with it. It can look, it can be a horrible sketch, but just something.
Okay, basically, like right now, we know that the far right pane was open from the middle pane, which was open from the first pane. But now if on the first pane we open a second note, that's going to push the middle and the right pane one move over to the right. And then it wouldn't be clear whether the towards geospatial hypermedia had been opened from the new note that we're opening from the first note, or whether it had been opened directly from the first note.
Okay, but currently it's not. It's really, it should be replacing everything. So if you open something to the left here, it replaces everything.
Oh, including the stuff that was already open to the right?
Yeah, so that's the current, so that trail is now replaced. So I haven't really implemented it that way. I need it breaks in some way, so you may have seen something that didn't behave that way. But my idea was that it really replaces everything to the right when you open a new branch.
I thought it was leaving what was to the right and just pushing an extra sheet in between.
No, it's really a logical trail in a sense, document to document here, or to note.
Okay, so I was thinking we were expanding tree-wise when we're just working list-wise. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but still, the idea that you talked about to actually shrinking it horizontally and branching it visually, so you could, if I clicked something else here, or special clicked even, or something command clicked, and I wanted to open a second thing here to the left, we can imagine that we divide the screen here, or the rest of the nodes, but the space disappears quite quickly here if you divide the screen. So I think it's rather buy another screen instead and put a new document.
I'm not sure if this would really be a problem, because why do you follow these citations, right? You either follow it to find some original point, which is bizarre, because chances are these documents talk about quite different things that are related. It's not like following linearly, of course, right? Which is why you have many sources. So I do think that it's useful to do this horizontal thing, and you can find a paper that you really care about, but I really think that's only one of the navigations, of course. I think we need to provide other means that this box on the left can help you find what's interesting. You're not going to go 20 things without stopping to read them, are you? And when you read them, you have another way to go further back.
Without sort of moving things too far away, once we get past, say, a couple of sort of trails, it sounds to me like one's doing something a bit like a hyperbolic view, where what you're looking at is a sort of spider type diagram, a graph where you're showing your exploratory pattern. Which begs the question: what are we trying to take from our exploration? Are we trying to better understand in our mind's eye the relationship between them? Are we just on an open voyage of discovery? I mean, I don't say this with a firm idea as to what the answer is, and there may be more than one way of doing it. But to a certain extent, it may be that what we are doing here is we're actually sort of building a graph type view. In a sense, that's the real outcome of what. So much of the text we don't actually need, except towards the end of our trails, because we have a proxy for it in the network we're creating. But then again, that of itself indicates that yet another part of the screen needs to be devoted to creating that graph. So it may just be creating a problem in a different way.
Personally, I see the whole view as a walk on a graph. It really it visualizes your walk on a graph, and so you can't really see. Oops, video disappeared. You can't really visualize all the branches you've been on, but or in a good way in this view. It's mostly a walk on a graph here. And but we could imagine, for example, if we are at the reference section and want to open 3 different interesting references here. So let's imagine that we click on these 3, special click, or click on these 3 references. We could construct a new list with 3 items in here. So we go back to a list view of some sort, or maybe the timeline, but doesn't really make sense for 3 items maybe. But so what we're doing here, we're starting this time we started with many documents we quickly narrowed it down to one document by selecting it. But we could also narrow it down to 10 documents from this by clicking on 10 different or choosing a category in here. So we have a 10 document. So we're either increasing the scope or narrowing down the scope, and we can do that. We can go both ways, not just narrowing. In regular search, you often just narrow, but sometimes you want to expand the scope again a bit by selecting a few items.
He likes a pizza.
Yeah.
Is he a pizza?
Yeah, Peter is a picture there, just still picture. Some people are video, some are picture. Can you tell Edgar had a sports day with football today?
I had sports.
Nice uniform.
Yeah, cool uniform. Okay, you're going to sit here with Dada for the whole rest of the evening, right? No? I'm going to kiss you on the head then. Okay, say bye to everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I have a thought, but Peter has his hand up. So, Peter, do you want to go first?
Daddy.
Bye.
Oh, I just want to say that I tried your idea and it's still doing the same thing in Tinderbox.
Okay, could you slide me a small TBX or something?
Yeah, sure thing.
Better do. I thought back to Adam's point. One thing is, if you scroll back to just to the left, so we can see the box at the left. So we've created a sort of trail here. We've gone 3 deep. One interesting thing that I wonder if one could do is, you wouldn't want it on the whole time because it would just look like a cat's cradle, but it might be interesting to have like a context key or something where I could hold that I will actually see a line going between the 3 things. So have I suddenly been, have I been looking at stuff in the 2020s and suddenly gone to something in 1987? Is one of the sort of serendipitous things that would allow you to do. So in other words, you just literally draw the trail across the things in the current right-hand trail. And I would see that as a toggle, not a permanent thing, because otherwise you're just putting a ton of noise into the view.
Yeah, and we can imagine that we quickly walk outside this corpus. Of course, if we have the full references here, maybe they cite an art paper or something else that is not highlighted in this view, but still I really agree. So in a way, there will be some duplication if this view also. And right now, what I'm not showing here is the other documents that cite this document. So I'm only showing the references in the other timeline view, and we also showed the whole documents that cite this. So in a way, we would like to have that as well. And I don't know if that would be some sort of command. So if we are, imagine
we could show that on top. Right, like here you have where you had your cursor. Can you wiggle it again so I can see it?
Yep.
Like on top here towards geospatial hypermedia, on top of that you could just list who cites it or something. But can I just mention, can you please go all the way left? So we seem to be over fascinated by timelines and citations, right? When reading, the thing that I'm interested in is stuff that is about. So for instance, I could imagine that, yes, it's kind of nice to know if something is old or new, but it's only one tiny bit of the puzzle. So imagine I select RFID here. And just by selecting that text, everything on the left that relates to RFID stays, everything else goes away instantly. And if it's RFID in the title, it has a bold color. If it's RFID in body copy, it has a less bold color. Similarly, if I select Kai Grönbeck, for instance, it does the same thing on the left. What that person has written, what that person has cited, and where that person has been cited. Because then we get into the something about this kind of a space, right? So we're still using the space on the left, but it has a different way to achieve its shape.
I mean, as things are, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if Adam has, but I could give him the text, except that I know that without actually quite a lot of cleaning, most of the stuff probably since pre-94 would be hardly usable for broad body copy text. So that's one slight problem. As I hear you speak, I'm just wondering what extra metadata might be needed. I mean, the thing I think I can most usefully bring to the party is to offer to, slave on some a data set, whether it's this or a different one, to populate whatever Adam's building. So that's sort of where my mind's going all the time, saying, well, do we need an extra slice of this? Do we need to go to generate it? Do we even need to fake it? I don't really mind, because I see no bad artifice in faking the short term, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to show a wider audience a vision of what might be.
But so we're also trying to make something useful.
Yeah, but the point is doing an enormous amount of work just so I'm saying, what happens if you click the one in the top corner? Might be taking on a rather vast body of work at this point. Though it might be something built in due course.
So one thing that having the programmer hat here, now we're talking. Having the programmer hat, it's easier to think, okay, we have this view, we filter it down in some way, or selecting something, creating this view, and then creating this view. But they are quite isolated from each other. But now we're saying, we're imagining that if I select RFID, for example, or a Kai here, that information flows back in some way to the first view, and selecting and highlighting things, and that's suddenly you have something kind of a global. Yeah, you have information flowing in many different directions here to all the different papers. Yeah, I really like that idea, but it's also makes my head spin in a way. So the alternative would be to, when you click RFID, that you actually filter it to the right. That you get a new subset, that you have your original set, and now you filter Kai or RFID down here in a new view. It could be a visual view again, a very graphical view with the selection. So we still keep the original selection.
The dream would be...
Yep.
Sorry, if you needed the view to go left, a thought is that effectively that you promote that to being a filter in the main pane. So if you wanted RFID to filter the whole lot, then rather than just sort of clicking it and filtering downwards, you'd have some mechanism to say, right now, this is a filter will apply to the overall master set, the master view, as it were. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense, but then the question comes, what to do with the documents you already have opened. They may not even... Okay, of course, if you select RFID, this document should still be relevant or something. It's very wrong with the data. But so there is a kind of a how information and how the browsing flows back and forth to the top view or starting point. Because, as I said, the alternative would be to just continue down your trail here. You check, you look for RFID, get a nice view, a new selection here, a global or a search of some sort of RFID, and then you select a new document, and you still kept your starting point where you started your browsing session. So you just.
Yeah. But how about this then?
Oops,
if you,
sorry.
So let's say you now select. A text, or of course you could have a Command F equivalent.
Yep.
You get the same as the screen that's on the left. You get that on the right, only showing the search results. But it would be amazingly cool if the one on the left fades out a bit, and even there's an animation of the boxes going from the column on the left over to the right. Doesn't have to be accurate, but just a sense that they're now moving over there. So the hypermedia model for mixed reality will then be shunted over to the right to make space for this view. But as key, of course, as you said, the advene active reading through hypervideo should not move at all, because that would be very jarring.
Yeah, so it's kind of, and are you going down a new trail here? When you're clicking, if we have hyperreal up here, and we want to also search for the admin project here?
I don't think so. I think what we need to do now is at the bottom of the screen or at the top, whatever, we have to have a search bar. So if you click on hyperreal what we discussed will happen, but in the search bar at the bottom, it will also appear. Someone can then choose to add a plus or minus for other search terms. But multiple clickings all over the place can get really clumsy, I think.
And when you say search, because there are potentially maybe many things to search here. We could search in documents. We could search here to highlight things. We could also search as in filter things to remove things. So there are kind of at least a few different kinds of search or find on the page, find in the corpus, find.
Well, when you're reading the document, I know you show it kind of in line. I think that's neat, but I would like it to open in your preferred reader. I would use my own reader software for that when you click on the document, for instance, ideally. So when you do here a search, it would be searching the corpus. So what I think might be useful, as in some kind of search places show, so imagine the green column. The search results that are on the left and are dark, that means it's in the title. But the ones that come after that means it is in the body copy, right? And then we can play with all kinds of visualizations. Is it mentioned once? Or is it mentioned more times? So we can play with color over time, or shadings, or lines, or connections to help us develop a sense of that space. Because one thing Mark found that he told us is that a lot of the keywords just mean anything, that they mean something for that paper, not other papers. There's actually a technical term for that. It's called nonce words. They're made up just to show off your own tech. But if you have the freedom of selecting any text in your document, chances are a lot of the words you use, people will have to understand. So therefore they will have been used elsewhere.
Go ahead, Adam.
No, just an observation that currently, if the interface is like on the left side here, it doesn't provide so much, so many advantages over just having a searchable list. So it has to be richer, more graphical, maybe stable, graphically stable, and highlighted in some way to be a bit more useful than. Of course, you get some sense of time here, but it's not that maybe not so strong that it gives a reason for existing this view.
One thing I might try and do is see if I can give you more strands of, as it were, curated metadata, so we're not playing with author keywords. And I may have to play slightly fast and loose because there's it's actually a rather large body of work to go through and do.
Yeah, but Mark,
but the important thing for Adam is basically, if we had 3 or 4 key themes within this data set, I think it would give more to play with, because we could say, right, well, just show us all the themes as separate groups.
Yeah. So
if I look at this subject, does it then take me jumping to another thing, or does RFID just exist in this one group? Because that's one of the other interesting parts of this sort of semi-visual search.
Mark, lovingly and respectfully, I disagree with you with adding more curated views, because adding the facility to the end user to do that and to share that, yes, that would be great. But I think what we can do quite a lot with what should be raw. I know this is you cleaning it up, but let's pretend it's raw, right? So if we can add interactions, then a document can be added at any time. You still have the interactions. As a separate thing, as we talked about before, for me to subscribe to the Mark Anderson view of this, I would love that. That is crucially important, like a DJ.
Yeah.
But the underlying set should be as raw as possible, I really think. Is that evil to say?
Yeah, but what I'm hearing is that Mark is sending me a list of 3 categories and 20 documents in each category, for example, and in a separate document, and that would be a subjective view or a special view that I could use as a filter.
No, what I meant was I would add into the existing data set you've got, effectively just another column. I made one for you that these are spatial hypertext things. I might just make something that effectively is a column that is a set, so that is only ever going to have one. Basically, these are the primary subjects, say, within the master area. and I probably wouldn't code everything, but I'm just trying to, the idea is there's something in this. It isn't taking anything away. It's not trying to go into a separate view. And I totally take Freud's point. But the point of doing this is just to give Adam a bit more to play with.
So we can slice this data set in a different direction, because author, it's just showing a few documents. It's not really a slice of the whole set. We would like to have a slice that is not time, I think.
So I'm just a bit eager. I see your hand, Peter, but you're way too polite. Okay. So the idea of being able to put in different kinds of data is crucial. We touched on that many times, right? I have written a timeline, as you know, of text stuff, and it'll never be complete. As an example, one of the things I'm looking at in books like this is, when did paper printing become cheap so that publishing exploded? It's actually something I need for my thesis. I keep forgetting to find it. It's actually really hard to find. So what I think would be extremely useful here is if I could take my timeline of whatever I'm interested in, put it in here, either visible or not, so that if in that area there you select the word paper, and it is also in this timeline that this user has subscribed to, in addition to the papers, you may get results from 1500, but it's just a line about paper. The reason I say it, it's not to be cutesy with different views. It is about, I'm a very lazy student. I'm an artist creator. I'm not an academic. When I look through this stuff, it's either I sit down with a document and I read it and I enjoy it and it goes in my brain. But when I'm looking for a large volume of stuff, it's to find something to cite. Let's be honest. And also, it's to find how something connects. So access to purely one single space is useful, but what I was just fighting Mark on, I think is actually a good idea to allow you to have other sets of things. So if I could give you my timeline in a format that you could easily import, that could be fun to see. Oh, there's so many hands up. I think Peter wins because he's been patient the longest.
Okay, I have a little sketch. I'd like to share my screen, and that'll show you what I had in mind with the hotbar idea.
On that note, can you just give me 1 second?
Sure.
Please prepare, just 1 second, sorry.
Napkin drawings are the best drawings.
How much of the original timeline do we want in here? Should we still kind of do the citation?
This is
visualization.
This is a problem I'm very aware of, having fiddled around with timeline stuff and timeline apps for quite a while. They tend to get very lumpy. So using any form of numerical scale to present the thing, although it's a timeline, rapidly visually, so just doesn't work, which is problematic. And one of the reasons I was, while we're waiting for Peter to show stuff up, I just says the thing that I was suggesting and putting more stuff in to help you with in the current data set was effectively to allow us to show the sort of thing that Freud's talking about without having to address the true horror of real data on a long-term timescale. When what actually happens is everything's in several blobs, and then one or two things are way out, and whatever you try, it's really quite hard to something that just magically shows stuff. And so what I was trying to do is think, can we sort of, in a sense, by playing with the data that we do have, show to an audience something that looks coherent, that shows the idea that's inherent in what Freud's saying, and then be able to say, and the way you'd actually use this would be to go, for instance, take the whole future of text timeline. That was what was behind my thinking.
Did I say something coherent?
Yeah, no, you absolutely did. What I was riffing on is the fact that I'm in this conversation, I'm always one thinking, okay, how do we make sure we have data that's coherent to show that? so that, you know, Adam can even put it on the screen. And my worry bead is, I know, having looked over the FOT volume 1 timeline stuff, that I grafted out in the end timeline, I think I remember, and it's still very bitty, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem with that sort of thing is it's very hard to show to other people, because it's never quite the right scale. So I was wondering if we could in a sense fake what you're wanting to show there within the data set we've got, or that we take the data set of the future of text and we play with it a bit to make it more condensed, so that it can be coherent enough when shown visually. I'm just conscious of the number of people who'll be in the room, any room, who just won't get it unless it's really quite simple. Bearing in mind that, you know, timelines are something they're not necessarily used to. They're not probably necessarily used to abstraction. They don't think in the overall picture. Yeah, that's very much what we want to excite them about. So it's how do we get data that allows us to show that in a form that you know, we can cram onto the screen without too much trouble.
So one question here is if we're trying to impress or open other people's mind, or if we are trying to impress ourselves here by doing something useful that we find very useful ourselves. So is the target the December presentation, or is the target doing something that we would find very interesting or enlightening or useful as a tool?
I think useful, and I think that follows through to the presentation, because I'm tired of demos that are cool looking but don't. And it has to be useful. But yeah, Peter, I'm back, and I'm very eager to see what you have to show.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. Now just imagine that each one of those slices is the single unified display. So we're not actually stacking all of them. Each C3 is 3 steps in after you start with node A, open node B from it, and open node C from it. And you see we have just a vertical line on top showing the evolution from A to B to C. Then at time 4, we are back at node A and we open node D off of node A. Now we're adding a second bar on the top showing that D came from A. At time 5, we're adding node E and out of node C. So we now add an extra bar showing the line from C to E while keeping the previous lines showing the sequence in which the other nodes were expanded. At time 6, we go a step further. We go back to node D and we push node F out. So B, C, and E both slide over. Node F comes out and we add another line showing that expansion. Then finally, at time 7, we go and we close node E. So we shrink that bar back down, and we're now at ADFBC, and we can actually figure out the sequence that the notes were open and which document we found each citation in, and they're still all being stacked in one single horizontal flow for optimal use of screen real estate. So that's sort of what I have in mind. I'm not quite sure about coding it offhand, but what do you think?
I think it's...
You're muted, Adam. Adam, you're muted.
Yeah, that was all I had to say about that. No, it's quite clear to me what this is. It's kind of a representation, the tree menu on the in a horizontal way.
Yeah.
It's a quite compact representation of a tree, and it's more like how you actually browse, because browsing is often that you go back and follow a different branch down the navigate. So the trail you form is not that easy. You go back and you go down a different branch, and then you go back again, and then in the browser you often lose some end because you go back and down a different branch, and then the original place you were at has disappeared, so you have to hunt down in your history because it's not in the back forward history anymore, because that's just a list usually. So I see what you're getting at, but it's quite complex as well. I wonder if it's too complex to show it that way. Another alternative view would be that you do it a bit more zoomable, like a zoomable user interface, where you actually split the screen and you can continue zoom into to the branches here. And I tried that 7 or 8 years ago, I think, doing that in a desktop app. Quite similar, but it gets messy, very messy quickly.
I just want to show a related thing, and that is when you select the word paper, why not have Google Scholar appear on the right? So you have the corpus we know on the left, but we have extra stuff on the left, on the right.
Oh, very nice.
Based on what? Based on the selected term, you mean?
Yeah, only that. So here I used the example paper. So the idea is that the right column, the user would set what search to use, maybe Google Scholar, maybe something else, maybe Google Books. But the idea is you have this organized, but you may choose to go into the wild as part of that. So you can see, so I just did this search here, intelligent paper, crumpled paper, maybe not useful, but it would be one of those columns that can be crushed or not, depending on the columns going to the right. And on the left, I've roughly indicated some dark documents to say that they have the word paper in them.
Also, another thought, we could maybe on the horizontal bars on top, if you moused over one of them, you could get a little tooltip showing what time it was that represented the state of the view.
Oh, that's interesting.
And to help manage the horizontal space, we could also have a little widget that would cause one of the documents to collapse down to just being a vertical bar, so that it would still be represented visually and you could re-expand it later on, but you could collapse out of view to be able to look at a couple of things that are a little bit further apart horizontally next to each other. So that could give us sort of a zooming element while still keeping the overall flow one unified horizontal spread.
I mean, I do wonder about the Google Scholar thing's interesting, but you to a certain extent, unless you type in a paper's exact title, you get an awful lot back. So single word search will just drown you in stuff. And what you see at the top is, I would say from experience, all too often not the most relevant thing, because the keyword search algorithm doesn't know your exact sort of view, your lens onto that keyword. I mean, it's a problem yet to be solved, so, which isn't meaning to say don't do it, but in a teaching context or a learning context, to a certain extent, we're just going to drag in more data for the students. One of the things that we don't teach people to do is to be more selective. We give them a choice of either computer says 42, which may or may not be wrong without explanation, or let's hope it's on page 1 results because I can't be asked to click onto page 2. Neither of which are good for learning.
So guys, are you all familiar with this? This is Liquid.
Liquid, yeah.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be on a full web page, but I made it small for that screenshot. The reason I'm showing it now is all it is, I do keyboard shortcut and then I get access to lots of searches, references, conversion, translations, blah, blah, blah. So I can do, if I want to do search Google Books, right? I do search S and books B, and there it is. So that's nice. I use it a million times a day. However, what could be very interesting is if I'm in wherever and I'm doing a search, I come across something interesting. I do this, and our system that Adam is building is here. So it would then search your system. So immediately it would open up with a selection of this. So that means that this would always be accessible for instant views of what you need to look at in your work. Because here I have added manually the ACM Digital Library. you know, adding it is trivial. It's based on you search for the word liquid search, one word, and the URL that's returned you put in here, and all this system does is replace the user selected text, replace that with liquid search, and give the URL. So the system will then come back with the term. So what do you think?
API call, yeah.
No, not even that. It's just a URL that happens.
Sorry, I
to
mean,
search
in
term.
a sense, it's going off to in many cases some kind of a database, and through its web API is calling back that search term.
So I'm just wondering if there's an interest for making what Adam is building here accessible through such a mechanism.
Yeah, but that would be useful, and in a sense, I think about the same thing inside the interface. That, but a bit more scoped, maybe, but that you have a command palette. So when you are at a specific document, one of the columns interacting with the text, if you select something select something, that you could open up a small command palette and do a Google Scholar search, or do a note here, add to my reading list, or open in a new browser window, or so you have a small command palette inside that view. So that is kind of turning it outside in, maybe, or inside out. You come from the outside into the system, but this system can also display things inline here.
We had a system called Hyperwords, which meant that you could select, oh my God, it works. Quick share now, quick, right. Okay, this is a normal web page. So you select any text and you get this little icon, this little bubble. So when you talk about a palette, yeah, don't like palette, but boom, isn't that cool?
Beautiful.
We could, Doug loved this. I'm so grateful that he saw it. So I can do flow that text. No, that doesn't work right now, but this was actually before the Internet Explorer little blue square, by the way.
Yeah.
A couple of years before, but so we can even do view occurrences. That actually, hang on, let me just reload that. That used to work really well. So just to view occurrences of this text, yeah, it's the same as a normal find, right?
This is Hyperwords you're showing us.
Yes,
yeah.
Where Doug was an official advisor. Yeah. But the point is, having this branching command structure gives you so much so easily. I guess the translation API doesn't work anymore. It used to actually translate the words in line, which was kind of cool.
I mean, I just throw a thing in from another direction. Because one of the things that, I mean, I love doing all this, but I'm one of the things that stays with me, especially from doing my sort of thesis stuff, was the stuff that doesn't show up in the search, because it often comes down to terminology, or just being too much, not signal to noise ratio in the results. I mean, on things like, I keep remembering and forgetting that in the system called Microcosm, early haptic system, that had a really cool way of doing trails. And I keep forgetting that the word they used for it is mimics. Now, the word isn't even used, I think, in any of the major papers about that tool. So, so how does one look that up? Saying, I know this system has this sort of thing. And those are the sort of things that when you're doing, perhaps not at an undergraduate level, but when you're trying to do research, the damn thing's in there. It's just you can't quite shine your searchlight on it, because you can't quite get close enough. And this is where the problem of keyword-based search, whether it's one keyword or multiple keywords, is almost neither here nor there. If you don't have the right keyword or some semantic mapping being done for you on the back of that, it's really, really hard to find stuff.
Yeah, you got to read books. That's in, you do have to, you have to read the whole thing. And the interview I did on Friday, Mlad, he was just wonderful. And the heading and takeaway I got from his was, for the kids in the future, read everything. Don't read just the heading. Read the whole damn document. And it's hard. We can't afford to do that always. So it's a bit cheesy and easy for me to say that, but you are pointing out to that. Oh, Rafael went. That's fair enough. We are out of time. But anyway, Adam, how are you feeling about the conversation moving?
Yeah, we have expanded the workload. Now we have a multi-dimensional. We're searching left and right, and in it branches everywhere. So we have, yeah. So to be realistic, we have to pick something, and maybe the most simple thing that we can do as a next step, I guess.
Oh, and there's a quick view of sort of the collapse concept.
Okay.
I made. Which is
Yeah, I
basically
think
down the thin vertical bar.
So this is kind of a tree view, horizontal tree view, where you actually see branches in a compact representation. And I like that, but that's quite an undertaking, and also for the users, because I think you could teach a user quite easily. My view as a linear thing, that things are getting replaced to the right. If you click something to the left, everything to the right will be replaced. You will go in it. I think that could be learned quite quickly. Of course, there is confusion that is in this group, what I showed you. So that shows me that it's not communicated in a clear way right now. But maybe we could do it very clear that things fly to the right and fly away in a good way, or fade away in a good way. So we really see that things disappear and appear, and from where. And the tree view is kind of. Yeah, if you implement that right, it would be even more useful, but it's really hard to get that right. And the risk is that it become a real soup on the way.
I think what you have here, Peter, is genius and brilliant, but it is specialist and advanced. And I think when we have the resources, I think we should absolutely try to implement this. But I do think it has too much initial cognitive load.
Yeah, I think it would have to be animated for you to be able to follow it. So it couldn't just be a transition from one to the other. You have to actually see the line growing and stretching, and breaking as a new item came in. Absent the animation, you would get confusion. But if you could actually animate that and show, suddenly you originally have the solid bar on the top, but then it would break where the new document's coming in, and the old documents, including the bar piece, would slide off smoothly to the right as the new document slid out from underneath it. And
well, Peter, you are on Mac, of course, so you have Keynote, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you try to animate one of these in Keynote using basic lines and then use Magic Move for, 1 or 2 slides for next time? That could be really interesting. I managed to silence Peter. How did I do that? Let me do that again.
No, he's busy working in Keynote.
What's easiest, whether to do that or to try to directly implement it in Nimba as actual final working code or not.
Well, that would be very, very interesting.
So the alternative, okay.
No, please, Adam.
Yeah, the alternative would be to have a zoomable interface where you actually subdivide things and you go inwards, but that things don't expand and push things away, but they get smaller inside a confined area. This is mostly for Peter, so the zoomable interface. So if you open yet another document, it takes the same place, but it shrinks. You have to zoom in to follow that trail. So the whole screen is fixed. You don't go outside it as much as you zoom in and out. Yep.
So Adam, I have a question. Unfortunately, I have to go, complicated reasons. the notion of giving the search term in a URL that I showed you, how much work do you think that would be for you to implement? Because that would be because obviously, yes, Liquid could use it, but anybody could use it then. You know, just send a search term in a URL and boom, you get a loaded page, not just a blank thing. Is that a lot of work, do you think?
No, it's not. In a sense, you could already do that with the regular timeline, I think. Yes, you can. With the previous timeline, I think we could easily fix that as well, or at least fix it. So it's not much more work. It's that is very easy to search into the document.
That's great. Would that be on a user's local server, or would you put that on a server like you did with using Mark server?
It depends. It depends. If it's public information, it could live on a web server somewhere. But if it's your library that you want to search, then you have to run a kind of a local web server to serve this, and your Liquid tool opens a local document.
Because I mean, I think it would be an initial demo of just having the previous design. You know, you're working on stuff, you select something, keyboard shortcut, boom, it opens in a timeline view, and you can toggle, you can see what's going on, and you can move around, you go back to your document, you keep working. And also within that, you have the link to the DOI page, which of course you can control click and choose copy link, and then go back to the word processor and cite that. You know, there's a lot of integrations there.
When we've opened this, so we've done a search, we've gone off, we've got Adam's new, we basically given Adam's, we've asked Adam's new visualization for a result set. So is it going to build a view based off some Google search results? I mean, what's the underlying data set that it's got? Because unless we're sort of trying to add something into the existing curated data set, there's sort of missing bit of the design and build, as I can see, because otherwise you fire it off and you come back with a nice empty display because the visual meta or whatever. In other words, what are we actually building on? When we've called the display says, yeah, I'm here, I'm ready to go. I've got to display this term. Where is the data relating to that term coming from, and in what format, such that it can be put onto Adam's screen as we sit here?
Well, that's the design. That's a very good question. It should obviously, to me anyway, be in this case the hypertext conference to start. You know, maybe we'll look at one external, one internal. Yep. But what should it search? Let's use the word paper again. Mm-hmm. It should, because it can't jump to one. If you click on a citation, then of course it can jump to one. But you're right. What should it?
The point being that Adam at the moment, for instance, doesn't have all the papers. It would. I'm not sure I've really got time to clean all the plain text version. The new ones are relatively clean. The old ones are in shambolic state. Some of the earliest OCR stuff. So we haven't necessarily got full text search. We've got abstracts because I cleaned those, and I know they work and they're there and they're already in the data set. So if you just want to say, if you say wanted to find RFID, well, the answer is we can't do that at the moment unless it's in the abstract. We don't have a way quick enough to sort of work within this metaphor at the moment to go and find all the papers from the set that mention RFID in them somewhere, unless it's in the abstract, the keywords or the title. It's just a limitation of where the data is at the moment.
Okay, so that's a very strong and interesting and horrible point.
I hate to be the Grinch. I mean, it's not because I wanted to.
No. It's okay. This is just a crappy document. Drop. So, as you know, in the current version of Reader, this is an old document. It probably doesn't support it. You click, and up comes the stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, I'll just make one in front of your very eyes. No, that doesn't have it. So there is a point to this. It says final, it is not.
Never done.
Never done, and it did. Right, so here, you click on this and you get this, right? So that's, we all know that. But what about is if I, as a software wonder for this, have access to all the data you have. It's just hidden in here because it's one of my current things. And I choose to click on infrastructure. That's it. Just select it. It searches through all these documents and it gives the equivalent of a pop-up if there is something. But all you do is, that's it.
Well,
Just
if you were basically passing some secret source, if you were basically passing a data report from your document as effectively an input to Adam's script, and the data contains sufficient for him to be able to graph it, yes, I could see that it probably would work. I mean, because I don't know if you're, presumably at the moment your current view is reading one of the current data sets via probably a JavaScript, but presumably it could be the case that the script, the page could be told, no, you're going to get your data and it's either being provided literally as a bloody long string or it's being provided as a resource and a URI that the page can resolve to read in, say some JSON or whatever. I can see how that will work. So the next question becomes, well, what, it's the match between what can be passed and consumed in rapid time by Adam's script and what it's reasonable to expect Jacob to try and create based on the data structure he's got inside Fred's docs. But it's an interesting idea.
Do we have a name for what you're building, Adam?
You mean this column interface? This
the whole package.
I don't.
Okay, so I'm afraid I have to go, family commitments, but I have one final thing to show you guys to make you go, And that is, can you see this?
Yep.
So here is a document and it has an option to open in library. Because it happens to be in the library we have access to.
Yep.
Wouldn't that in itself be quite useful?
In terms of reader, this is reader slash.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, in terms of library, I mean your library. So you, the user, within the permissions that you, the user, have, which will be set up somewhere in the ecosystem. Yeah.
We'll develop. Yeah, exactly. Some kind of infrastructure where, if I'm subscribed to this library, that library, and that book is on that library, it would say like here, I can open it in. I can open the DOI, of course. And the web
so what does it mean to open in library? Is it?
It means that it opens. The whole. It means that it opens in the view that's on Mark's server with that document selected in one of the two timeline views, or opening in so much nonsense. Opens here, but in the middle.
Well, also, if ACM get a wiggle on, they keep saying they're talking about opening up the library. That would make life much easier because we wouldn't have to consider about whether you are or aren't allowed to look at things. But I know that's sort of thing, passage of time sort of thing. One other thought in terms of opening it, there are two potential sources for this document. One is effectively the publisher's canonical source in the library, and the other is the copy that you have to hold locally. How those two are identified, I don't quite know, because your local copy might be called abc123.pdf.
A visual meta.
There's a mapping issue, but let's assume that isn't one. Obviously, in most cases, it would be useful to use the local copy because you might not be online, or it might just be quicker.
Well, I mean, the point is the point is you have a series of options. So DOI should go to the download page. So that's there already, of course.
Yep.
But open in local library if the system knows you have it.
Yep.
Open online in the ACM. It could even be one called open in Adam library.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting idea too, because even if it's there and and everyone says, oh, how does it quite work? The point is, it allows someone to say, well, it damn well ought to work. Why doesn't it? Because we're at the stage where we have all this interconnected stuff, and at some point, we're gaining nothing out of it if it doesn't just work in this fashion. So it probably means we need to do some more work on the, general metadata ecosystem and things. But when we know what that is, we can address it. But unless we start creating the demand for this.
Yeah, well, that's why I initially liked the idea of augmenting teachers, because that's how hopefully there can be more of a demand for visual meta. Because if teachers can do easier grading, well, they're going to use it, right? A teacher doesn't get paid a lot, but they spend a lot of time. So if we can save them time, it's the same as saving money, right? And it helps their students. But even for something like this, as Adam, I'm not sure if you know, but if I click on a journal article DOI, I get to that journal article. I don't get to that journal easily. So I can't see what it is in, which is crazy. Like it's like opening a book and most of the pages are torn out. So having some sort of a link here to open in what you are building, I instantly have context and further interaction. So that's why this could be kind of fun.
If the references, depending on how the reference work is done. So, for instance, all of the stuff I did, I know we tripped over the ligature issue, but when I did all my thesis stuff, because it's got all the bibtech in there, so you might be looking at a journal article, but in the underlying bibtech that's accessible to the document, it would say, for instance, which journal it was in, which edition. So although it's not necessarily being used to draw the entirety of the screen reference, it's in there and addressable through that. So that's a vector, well, assuming the data's there and it's clean and stuff, but there is a vector where that could be calculated, I think, actually. I mean, it's not going to help you with someone who published a technical paper in 1990 on their university server that you can only reach by the Wayback Machine, but we're always going to have that. But for something that's a well-ordered journal, good sort of first world noise on thing, I don't think it's unreasonable that we couldn't have a situation where that information is close enough that we can calculate our way to it.
It's 20 past, I gotta go. I think we made some progress. What do you guys think?
Yeah, great session.
Yep, yeah, and we have to do this in some way. Actually, discuss what is shown, what we want to do, and what we want to have in there. It may be a bit, grinding work, but we have to do it in some way, I think.
And let me know, Adam, genuinely, if there's something that I can add to the data set for you, even if we have to make the damn thing up. But the point is, if there's something I can do, if you let me know, because I mean, whichever way it is, it's going to be a body of work to do. But I'd rather me guess at stuff that might be useful. If having had some time to sort of mull over this, you think, oh, it would be really useful if I could have, an extra column or a set of something.
I'd like to have that extra column or a plain text file or something, just a list and a category header. Okay. So I can do a kind of a filter or something, so I can slice a data set in some other direction. So, the spatial hypertext or,
Sure. One question arises from that is, do you want the assignments to be unique? In other words, no document is. In other words, is it a single value thing? It's either in this set or that set, but not more than one.
No, it can be in. It can be in different. And I only need the identifier. I can get so just a list. If you send me an email with I can construct the actual JSON or whatever file myself. So I just want a list of maybe 40 documents and 2-3 categories, and they can be in. It should be messy. They should be in different. They can overlap and belong to different. It's good to have that, and we can see if.
And before we go, Mark, thanks so much for solving my Tinderbox export problem. The code's working perfectly now.
Okay.
You guys are weird. Okay, thanks, guys. Look forward to further dialogue and doing and so on.
Great. And thanks for help earlier, Fred. That was most useful. Thanks.
Sorry for making the problems to make you need the help to begin with.
No. As I say, it's a concept.